There are a number of issues which came up in PMQs today, and I'm just going to go through them today and then leave you to look at PMQs on your own. Um, it begins with a statement by the speaker about the Southport stabbings, and I'm like many people, I'm a passionate believer in the presumption of innocence, but I'm also a passionate believer in um, in honesty, or rather in responsibility. And what we've got here is a series of ducking of responsibility. I think we have to make it very clear that rioting is always wrong, and in a civilized society, a riot is a sign that that society has lost its direction. And in the past, a society has responded very harshly to riots, and Keir Starmer responded firmly, but with justice. And the internet is awash with people trying to say, "Well, we told you, and we were there first." Even somebody who is standing with a gun in their hands is entitled to a fair trial. And there are two issues here today which spark concerns about that. Number one is the trial of the fellow who is accused of stabbing the three girls. And as the speaker points out, those three girls who were killed, they need justice, and their families need to see justice done, and that mustn't be scuppered because of the obsessive efforts by people online to justify their riots. I think there is a case for the police and for the government to explain what they knew when they knew it. The facts are clear. The public was waylaid by social media into thinking that this was an issue of illegal migration and Islamic terrorism. It wasn't. It wasn't. And whether an individual chooses to scout the media, scout the internet for terrorist advice, and espouses terrorist identities and terrorist slogans, that is an entirely different matter. A lot of this has come to light subsequently, and it's and if we probe too deeply and too publicly, defendants accused of the worst type of crime, murder, will be acquitted, or the charge will be reduced to manslaughter, or other facts may come to light which provide us with an entirely different approach. That's all well and good, but I don't know whether this individual has confessed to the crimes of which he's charged, and the alternative is a sort of social media mob justice, and that is wrong. Now, there's a distinction between justice and morality, and public morality, and that's where, other than Axel Rudakubana, the issue of Mike Amesbury comes up. Innocent until proven guilty is the legal standard. But Amesbury has a second job, has a second issue. He has a second responsibility, and that is to the people who elected him, and to the dignity of the house in which he sits. And I don't believe that the example that he has given is worthy of the House of Commons. And it's not about the due process of the law. The due process of the law can be hurried, as indeed we saw in a lot of the cases over the summer with respect to the riots. And if this case drags on for a long period of time, it means, number one, that his constituents do not have a representative in Parliament, which is wrong. And number two, that Parliament is condoning a form of behaviour which is abhorrent. Now, it doesn't mean that he has necessarily committed that behaviour, but it appears that he has. And because there is video footage of him punching somebody 6 times, that footage either needs to be contextualized by him independently of any court case, or he needs to resign. Because that footage condones that sort of behavior, at least until or unless he is found guilty of some crime and is given some sort of punishment. So it's complex. We have questions to ask. We have questions that should be asked, and we shouldn't be hiding behind the legal process to get answers to those questions. Questions have been handled by the authorities in a way that has not been as transparent with the public as it should have been, and the effect that this creates is a level of manipulation. And I think that's worrying. Now, when it comes to Prime Minister's questions itself, what we saw was a much calmer PMQs, very pleasant banter, respectful relationship between Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer, which I think certainly wouldn't have been the case with Boris Johnson. I don't think Boris and Sir Keir liked each other at all. I think it's important that scrutiny and accountability are upheld, and the nice words from the Speaker for Rishi Sunak are commendable. But actually, in this PMQs, very little was achieved.
I wish to remind the House that the following horrendous, terrible incident in Southport on the 29th of July, a suspect is awaiting trial, having been charged with multiple offences. That means the House Sub Judice resolution is engaged and references should not be made to the case. I know that all honourable members wish to see justice done in this case. It is therefore of paramount importance that nothing is said in this House which could potentially prejudice a proper trial or lead to it being abandoned. I know it can be frustrating when we can see reports in the media of the matters that we are not free to discuss here. But that arises from Parliament's constitutional relationship with the courts. More importantly, at the heart of this case are 3 young girls. We all want to see justice done for them and for their families, and for others injured in and affected by this appalling incident. Speculation about the cases, including comments made in this House, could seriously risk prejudicing proceedings. I know that none of us would ever wish to do that. Therefore, it would be wrong of me to exercise a waiver in this case, and members should not refer to it or risk prejudicing this case. Of course, I understand that members have legitimate questions about the circumstances surrounding this case. There will be no doubt wanting ministers to commit that they will come to the House and answer those questions once the legal proceedings are concluded. I give my assurance that I will ensure there are ample opportunities to do so. My understanding is that this trial is expected to start in January, and if members have questions about the operation and the decision on St Sub Judice's resolution, they can speak to the clerks and the Speaker's Council. In the meantime, our thoughts are with the family and friends of Bibi, Elsie and Alice, and all of those who were injured and affected on this horrendous day. Before I call the Prime Minister, I would like to mark the fact that this is the last time the Right Honourable Member for Richmond and Northallerton will appear at the dispatch box during PMQs. There's a bit more to do afterwards, but he has spoken at this dispatch box as Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition, and after today, we all look forward to his continued contributions from the backbenches. We wish him and his family well in the future endeavours. And I say personally, thank you for a working relationship. We now come to Prime Minister's questions. I call Katrina Murray.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish everyone celebrating in the UK and around the world a joyful Diwali.
In this PMQs, Rishi Sunak talked about artificial intelligence, Russia and Ukraine. He mentions that he's the first Asian Prime Minister, said that it's not a big deal, which is rather charming. He talks about cricket. He makes a nice joke about meeting the relevant minister to discuss the A66. And that's basically it. Basically, this is a prelude
to come
for the
together
budget.
to celebrate and focus on a brighter future. Last Diwali, the leader of the opposition and his family lit the deers outside 10 Downing Street. It was a significant moment in our national story. The first British Asian Prime Minister is a reminder that this is a country where people of every background can fulfil their dreams, and it makes us all proud to be British. Mr. Speaker, as you've just referenced, as this is our last exchange across the dispatch boxes, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the Leader of the Opposition for his service. Now, of course, we've had political disagreements, ideological differences, we've argued at some length. But I want to thank him for his hard work, for his commitment, and for his decency in everything that he has done. And I too wish him and his family the very best for whatever the future may hold for them. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Katrina Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to associate myself with the remarks made by the Prime Minister. Cumbernauld, in my constituency, was promised an elective and diagnostic treatment centre by the Scottish Government in 2021. This has continued to be delayed and is now alleged to be mothballed. What assurances can the Prime Minister give me that any Barney consequentials from today's budget are used to benefit my constituents and not be held on to by the Scottish Government?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question. I'm sorry to hear about the delays affecting her constituents. The party opposite oversaw years of mismanagement and chaos, and the impact on Scottish NHS is evident. This Labour government is committed to delivering for the Scottish people, including making sure that we have an NHS fit for the future. The Chancellor will set out details in just a few moments.
Leader of the Opposition, Rishi Sunak.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for your kind words, and indeed, thank you to the Prime Minister for his kind words. Indeed, no Prime Minister looks forward to PMQs, but I always did like this pre-budget one, because it was, for a change, nice not to be the main event and just the warm-up act. But as you said, Mr. Speaker, today is my last appearance at PMQs, and I'm happy to confirm reports that I will now be spending more time in the greatest place on earth, where the scenery is worthy. The scenery is indeed worthy of a movie set, and everyone is a character. That's right, Mr. Speaker. If anyone needs me, I will be in Yorkshire. So, and as an adopted Yorkshireman, I'm particularly looking forward to doing the coast-to-coast walk that runs through my constituency and many others. Since 2015, we've made significant progress with a campaign to make it a national trail, and indeed, Natural England are close to concluding their work. So, can I ask the Prime Minister to ensure that the coast-to-coast does indeed become Britain's greatest national trail, and in preparation for my return to the backbenches, would he meet with me to discuss it?
Mr. Speaker, I thought he was about to ask me to join him on the walk. But certainly, I will meet him, and it is an important point.
Mr. Speaker, that is very kind of the Prime Minister. I know he's... I know he's partial to the Lake District, but perhaps we can tempt him over to our end as well. Now, Yorkshire is not just famous for its walks, but also for being home to some of England's greatest cricketers. Now, sadly, no one's going to put me on that list, Mr. Speaker, but who knows? I've got a lot more time to practice now. So, but cricket does have the power to bring people together from all communities and give them fantastic opportunities, as shown so powerfully by Andrew Flintoff's recent documentary. Now, we also lead the world in female participation, and that will stand us in good stead when we host the Women's World Cup in 2026 and when cricket becomes an Olympic sport in 2028. So could I therefore ask the Prime Minister to continue government support for the England and Wales Cricket Board's new initiative to get cricket into vastly more state schools, fostering a whole new generation of cricketers for us all to cheer on at every level?
Yes, is the answer to that question. And the point is a really important one. We celebrate cricket, it does bring communities together, but it's also really important for children and young people to enjoy sport, lots of different sports, because it gives them a confidence that they might not otherwise have. It gives them the ability to work in a team and teaches them about skills like leadership. So I'm fully supportive.
Now, our two predecessors, Sir Tony Blair and Lord Hague, have repeatedly come together and powerfully argued in their joint reports that it is vital for the future prosperity of Britain's economy, society and public services for us to be a world leader in technology and innovation. Now, the Prime Minister and I may not yet be at our joint report writing stage yet, but in a similar spirit of cross-party agreement, could I ask him to find his inner tech bro and continue to support emerging British tech businesses and establish our country as the home of AI growth and innovation?
Prime Minister.
Yes, and this is a really important point. The Leader of the Opposition held a summit last year on AI, which was very important. We have been bringing together the leaders in AI. We have a huge advantage in this country, being ranked in the top 3 in the world. AI is going to have huge potential for our growth, for our public services, and I think the whole House should be fully supportive of this.
Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister has the immense privilege... The Prime Minister has the immense privilege of being the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Now, Northern Ireland is a special part of our union, but one that needs particular care, attention and respect. Having a strong functioning assembly at Stormont is good for the people of Northern Ireland and good for our union. And that's why I was so pleased to see government restored there earlier this year, and I'm grateful to him for his support with that. So can he assure the House that he will continue to work to keep Stormont open, delivering for the Northern Irish people and strengthening Northern Ireland's place in our union?
Prime Minister.
Yes, and again, this is a really important point and one that matters to me personally. I worked for 5 years in Northern Ireland on some of the proposals under the Good Friday Agreement, in particular the transformation of the RUC into the Police Service of Northern Ireland. I worked with both communities there. It was for 5 years. It was very important to me, had a huge impact on me, and so I care deeply about Northern Ireland, and I absolutely agree that the institutions government needs to be up and running and want to give all support I can to the further development in Northern Ireland.
Now, as Prime Minister, he will be acutely aware of the threats that our United Kingdom faces from an axis of authoritarian states, Iran, North Korea, Russia and China. And in particular, I'm proud of the way that this House has united in standing up to Russian aggression in Ukraine. And I know that we will never waver in our commitment to the Ukrainian cause. Now, I will always be grateful for the support that he gave me when we were the first country to send Ukraine Western battle tanks, long-range missiles, and the first to offer security assurances to Kyiv. So in light of the threats that we face, can I urge him to always maintain the strength of the transatlantic alliance and ensure that NATO remains the bedrock of Western security, with the United Kingdom playing a leading role?
Yes, and NATO is, in my view, as important today as the day in which it was created, in light of the challenges that we face. And it was a Labour government that was the proud co-founder of NATO, and we've repeatedly said we support NATO to the hilt.
Well, finally, Mr. Speaker, tomorrow is Diwali, and I became leader of my party during Diwali, and I now stand down during that same festival. So I'm proud to have been the first British Asian Prime Minister, but I was even prouder that it was not that big a deal. And that speaks volumes about the values of the British people, of our country, and of this Parliament. So will the Prime Minister join me in applauding the kindness, decency and tolerance that has always been the British way?
Prime Minister.
Yes, and I meant what I said when I said that we were all proud to see him standing there as Prime Minister, representing our diverse country. We were all proud. I think everybody in this House was. So I thank him for that. And his last question, final question as leader of the opposition, although judging by the speed with which his party goes through leaders, he may be back here before too long. But in the meantime, I'm sure he'll be a great champion for the people of Richmond. But Mr. Speaker, finally, I'm sure he won't mind me disclosing to the House the contents of a letter that he wrote to me this week. My answer to it is clear. Yes, I will arrange for him to meet the relevant minister about the A66 that runs through his constituency.
Dave Begg-Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in Hackney, nearly 4,000 children who could fill 8 primary schools are in temporary accommodation, many outside London. This is bad for their future opportunities. It's ripping apart our communities. I welcome the government's pledge to build new homes, but will he ensure that those who cannot have a roof over their head are a top priority in that long queue for new housing?
Prime Minister.
I thank you for raising this issue. It is a source of national shame that there are just under 1.3 million households on a social housing waiting list, including, I think, 8,000 of them in Hackney. The best way to tackle overcrowding and meet housing need is to build the homes this country needs, and that's why we will deliver the 1.5 million homes over this Parliament, and the Chancellor will set out further details in just a moment.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with your remarks and the remarks of the Prime Minister about the right honourable gentleman, the member for Richmond and Northallerton, and thank him for his service and wish him and the whole country a happy Diwali. Despite our political differences, I've always felt a certain kinship since the general election, when he was the only other party leader to get as wet as I did. I'm looking forward to debating the budgets with him and the Chancellor shortly, but can I wish him and his family all the best for the future. Mr. Speaker, next month's summit in Baku is a chance for the UK to regain world leadership on climate change, a role disastrously lost under the Conservatives. As this is the final summit before countries must ratchet up their new Paris agreements before 2035. Will the Prime Minister take this opportunity to seize back world leadership on climate change by committing today to support the targets set out this week by the Independent Climate Change Committee and publish a programme to deliver on those?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we will seize that initiative. We've reset on the international stage, and climate is one of the biggest challenges that we face. I will be going to the conference this year, as I went, in fact, last year, as leader of the opposition, to continue those discussions about how we reach the very important targets that we must reach.
Shred David.
I thank the Prime Minister for his reply. I hope we can really take that world leadership back again. Another issue which the UK needs to show urgent leadership on is the escalating war in Sudan. Tens of thousands of people have been killed. 11 million Sudanese have had to flee from their homes, Mr. Speaker. The reports of mass killings and horrifying sexual violence against women are truly stomach-churning. So when the UK takes over presidency of the UN Security Council this Friday, will the Prime Minister make it a priority to secure a new resolution on preventing future atrocities, including a no-fly zone to stop the Iranian drones?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for raising this because it is an important issue, and I don't think we discuss it enough in this House. We continue to see mounting evidence of appalling atrocities against civilians and unacceptable restrictions on humanitarian access, and working with international partners, including as penholder, as he knows, at the UN Security Council to end the violence, secure humanitarian access and ensure the protection of civilians is a major priority.
Rachel Baskin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is this Labour government in setting up a child poverty task force which is determined to move 4.3 million children in poverty today into a better future. However, we also inherited 2.1 million older people in poverty. So will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, agree to setting up a pensioner poverty task force so that older people don't have to worry about paying for their housing, food and heating costs, and ensure that they have dignity in later life?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the scale of poverty that we inherited in this country is truly appalling, with over 4 million children now growing up in low-income families. We'll deliver on a manifesto commitment to tackle child poverty, as we did last time in government, and we'll publish our strategy in the spring.
Colin Denny.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The ICJ has mandated that Israel ensures access to life-saving aid in Gaza under Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, yet the Israeli government has voted to effectively block its delivery. As a human rights lawyer, does the Prime Minister agree that banning UNRWA is a breach of international law? And how much more evidence does he need before calling out what is happening as a genocide and acting in line with the UK's responsibilities as a signatory of the Genocide Convention?
Minister.
I'm very worried and concerned about the decision that's just been taken by the Parliament in relation to UNRWA. There's a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and that decision will only make it much worse, which is why I've expressed my concern about it already before today and will continue to do so. It needs to be reversed. It needs to be reversed very, very quickly indeed. I have never described what's going on in Gaza as genocide. I do agree that all sides should comply with international law.
Melanie Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, a Scottish Government Health Minister was forced to apologise for waiting times in my area of Fife, where some patients wait more than 2 years for treatment. My constituents deserve so much better than this. Does the Prime Minister agree that the SNP must take responsibility for 17 years of failure? And if today's budget delivers a bigger block grant to Scotland, they must sort out the mess they have made of Scotland's precious NHS.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is the second time this has come up this afternoon in Prime Minister's questions. I hope the SNP are listening good and hard, because I'm sorry to hear her constituents have been waiting so many years for their medical treatment that they need. We are committed the NHS, and the Chancellor will have a lot more to say about that in just a moment.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's own independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, Jonathan Hall KC, has said repeatedly recently that it is important in incidents of terrorism that the authorities put out more information sooner in order to prevent an information gap. Does the Prime Minister agree?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, obviously I'll tread carefully in answering this question for the very reasons that you yourself set out at the beginning of this session. I think it's very important, first and foremost, that in all cases, including the particularly difficult case that the Speaker mentioned earlier, that the police and prosecutors are able to do their difficult job. And all of us in this House have a choice to make, including both candidates to be the next Tory leader.
This is an inappropriate question by Richard Tice, which is a reference really to the case taking place at the moment, along with Keir Starmer's rebuke to Robert Jenrick for getting involved in the conspiracy theory stuff. Is quite extraordinary. It's extraordinary that given the Speaker's admonition at the beginning of this session that a member of Reform should choose to ignore it and ask this question. Keir Starmer is very good-natured in his response. I would be less so.
They can either support the police in their difficult task, or they can undermine the police in their difficult task. And I know which side I'm on.
Rachel Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minutes from here in the communities of Victoria, Pimlico, Paddington,